Welcome to this explainer. Look, we've all been there, right? You're staring at your laptop at 11 p.m., fueled by lukewarm coffee, totally convinced that if you just push a little bit harder, grind just a little bit longer, well, the business will finally stabilize. It's the modern business grind, and honestly, it's exhausting. But today, we're looking at a deeply personal yet incredibly practical concept that bridges two worlds we almost never put in the same sentence: that exhausting business grind and personal healing. Because it turns out they aren't just kind of related, they are actually reflections of the exact same process. So let's unpack this mirror between healing and sustainable business. The shared blueprint: how healing mirrors sustainability. Okay, let's dive into this. The thesis here is actually pretty surprising. We have this intense tendency to strictly categorize our lives. We think of business as cold, calculated, strategy-driven, right? It's all KPIs, profit margins, and quarterly reviews. And on the flip side, we treat healing as soft, emotional, intensely personal, stuff you do on a meditation cushion or maybe in a therapist's office. But the source material completely shatters that divide. It reveals that the absolute hardest personal healing is actually the exact template for a sustainable business. Just listen to this profound realization from the source text. Quote, "The practices that carried me through the hardest healing of my life turned out to be the exact template for how I eventually taught sustainability inside this framework." I want you to really think about that for a second. The absolute hardest moments of personal recovery, the specific tools that pull us out of the dark after a devastating personal loss or total burnout or trauma, those are the exact same tools that keep a business alive and thriving for the long haul. Surviving a catastrophic product launch, navigating a sudden market crash, or just trying to save a failing startup requires the exact same psychological and operational toolkit as putting your own life back together. So, we have to ask ourselves, why is this not a coincidence? Why on earth do these two seemingly opposite arenas overlap so perfectly? Well, really think about it. At the end of the day, a business is not a machine. It's just not. It is a fragile ecosystem made up of human beings trying to build something together. Therefore, sustainable business practices and sustainable healing practices are built from the exact same raw materials. Human repair mechanisms apply perfectly to organizational repair. Let's look at what those materials actually are. The raw materials. Deconstructing the internal practices. Because before we can build outwards into our businesses, our teams, and our networks, we really have to look inwards. So, we're going to break down the first three internal practices that make up this shared blueprint. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how beautifully simple yet incredibly difficult these steps actually are in practice. Step 1 is all about awareness. Understand what's actually happening to you instead of just pushing through blindly. In business, how often do we just put our heads down and grind through the trouble? We ignore terrible churn rates or a really toxic company culture because we're completely obsessed with hitting top-line revenue. We push blindly instead of diagnosing the actual pain. Step 2 requires immense faith. Trust a process even when you can't see the whole path. We obsess over having this flawless 10-year business plan, but let's be real, reality never follows the plan. In a pivot culture, you don't need to see the final destination just to take the next right step. And finally, step 3 is purely practical. Get things out of your head and onto paper. When you're having a messy, chaotic quarter, literally the worst thing you can do is carry that heavy mental load at 3 a.m. Writing it down externalizes the threat. It takes the chaos out of your mind and turns it into a tangible problem you can actually solve. Reclaiming real community, the first external pillar. So we've established the internal work, right? That mental framework of awareness, trust, and externalization. Now we're moving from those internal practices to how we interact with others. We are transitioning to the external, highly relational materials of this framework. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference between what we think we need and what we actually need. On one side, we have performed community. We all know exactly what this is. It's that stiff networking event where everyone's handing out glossy business cards, sipping overpriced sparkling water, and pretending their Q3 was absolutely flawless. It's putting on a facade of constant winning. But on the other side is real community. This is the kind of community that lets you be a mess without judgment. It's the late-night phone call to a mentor when you realize payroll is going to be short. Look, whether you're healing a deeply personal wound or trying to navigate a failing quarter in your business, you need people who embrace the mess, not just the polished performance. You simply can't heal, and you definitely can't build sustainably in an echo chamber of fake perfection. Let's move to and see how this builds into redefining actual rest, the second external pillar. This brings us to the final raw material, and man, it is exactly where so many well-intentioned, hardworking professionals get completely trapped. There is a massive, massive difference between actual rest and productivity disguised as rest. So much of what we call rest in modern corporate culture is really just pausing momentarily so we can work harder tomorrow. It's the whole work hard, play hard myth. It is treated as a reward we give ourselves, earned only after collapse. We push and we push and we ignore the warning signs until our bodies or our businesses completely break, and then we finally allow ourselves to stop. We literally treat rest like an emergency room visit. But think about it. You wouldn't wait until you're having a heart attack to start eating a vegetable, right? So why wait until total burnout to take a weekend off? Actual rest is built in deliberately. It's a structural, non-negotiable part of the system penciled into the calendar just like a board meeting, rather than a forced hospitalization at the end of a really long grind. The practical step, moving from theory to action. Okay, so we've mapped out the theory, and honestly, the connection makes absolute sense. Healing and business both demand honest awareness, trusting the blind steps, getting the chaos on paper, finding real community, and committing to deliberate rest. But knowing this isn't enough. Information without application is just entertainment. It's time to shift gears here and challenge ourselves to implement these ideas immediately. Here's the practical step. Consider this a pattern interrupt for your week. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the perfect time when everything magically slows down or when your inbox is finally at zero, because spoiler alert, that day will never come. You have to pick one element right now, either reaching out to build a real messy community or scheduling a block of actual structural rest, and build it in this week. I want to leave you with this final, powerful question directly from the source material. What would it look like to build rest and community into your business now, rather than waiting until you feel like you've earned it? You don't have to earn the right to be healthy, and your business shouldn't have to collapse before it learns how to be sustainable. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks a tangible change in how you build and how you heal.